Welcome. Well, we'll go ahead and get started today. So first, I want to thank you all for coming. I'm really excited to hear all the different things that have been happening as a result of the pandemic and how we're looking forward, how we're moving forward. So today we're here to talk about that. So thinking about mathematics, teaching and learning, moving forward out of this pandemic, the lessons that we've learned that will support our best practices. So you'll see on the screen, I'll let you know who our panelists are. So we have three wonderful people here coming today. Stephen, if you want to go to the next slide for me. So our three people, we have Jessica Laney. So she has her master's degree in mathematics education from Purdue University. She's been teaching for 15 years as a high school math teacher. And she said one of her favorite classes to teach is Algebra 2, really like enjoying helping, okay, go back a screen there. I'm really enjoying kind of helping kids, I think, feel like they can learn mathematics, right? And then moving forward from there. We also have Dr. Mckee. So she has her PhD in mathematics education from Purdue here. She is a current high school mathematics teacher. She's been teaching for 15 years. I think did I say that about Jessica too? Both of them 15 years of teaching experience, so a lot of experience. And Dr. Mckee also has done some teaching at Ivy Tech. And she likes teaching the dual credit trig, Precalc, and the AB calculus, kind of the more independent learners. And then our third panelist here is Mike Wolkus, and he is a PhD candidate here at Purdue in mathematics education. He was a former high school mathematics teacher, and he's a current mathematics teacher educator. So he is working with the future high school math teachers here at Purdue, teaching them courses and working with them as they prepare to go out into the field. So thank you, all three of you. We really appreciate you coming. So I think maybe we should start with hearing a little bit from each of you, kind of about your situations over this last year, your school structure, kind of were you hybrid, were you virtual, were you a little bit, or you were all in person, kind of sharing a little bit with that and the different classes you taught. Share maybe a little story, a little bit about that, and then we'll move forward from there. So Jessica, do you want to start us off? Maybe. Yeah.
All right, just like the year went, right? Technical difficulties right from the jump. I teach at a rural school, so we have about 650 students in grades 7 through 12. We were in person all year, which was for us one of the main goals is to try to be in person the entire time. This year I taught pre-calculus and trig, quantitative reasoning, finite, and then AP calculus. Those were the courses I taught this year. I think probably one of my favorite things this year was being in person. After we had shut down in the spring, just being able to be with the kids in person and being hands-on with them was something that I felt like did. And then after the shut spring, we really found that we missed that and we needed that back, the kids and the students alike, or the kids and the adults alike. So I think that was the best part of the year, just being in person, putting aside all the math and all of their other courses, just being together and having that interaction in person after the shutdown was really great for us.
Yes, thank you. I agree. There's just something about being in person, right? And that energy that we can have being together. So thank you for sharing that and welcome. So Dr. Mckee, would you like to go next?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I taught this year. I taught pre-calculus. I taught a separate course called trigonometry, and I taught academic algebra 2. And that was at the high school level. And then additionally in the fall, I taught at Ivy Tech. I taught quantitative reasoning at Ivy Tech. And I think we were in person all year, except for we did have small periods of time where we had set days where we were at home. They did them 3 times throughout the first quarter. And then after Thanksgiving, we were at home for 2 weeks. And then we started off after Christmas break, we started off at home. And then we came back in person, and then we were lucky to be in person all year, the rest of the year. And I think, I think the biggest thing I took away from this year was basically that my students really, I started recording my lessons and my students really enjoyed that a lot more than I thought they would. And I quickly got used to messing up on camera and not caring so much. So
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. I think I would agree with you. My experience too with my students enjoying kind of those videos, not necessarily as their main use of learning the content, right? But if they had a question they want to revisit, right? They going back and looking at the video as opposed to like trying to read their book. They love technology. They love kind of that too. So thank you for sharing. Okay, and Mike, would you like to take the lead next here?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Mike Locus. As Brooke said, I'm a PhD candidate in math education. So I guess a little over a year ago, we were all thrust online. And so I was teaching the secondary methods course, and we just went straight to Zoom. And then for the last year or so, fall and spring, I've been teaching our secondary mathematics education students, so small classes, like 4 students in a class, while they're doing their field experience placements in secondary schools, that I think with some of the people on this call. And also teaching Knowing the World Through Mathematics, which is the course I'm studying for my dissertation, which is also a quantitative reasoning course, as Dr. Mckee was talking about. And this focuses on mathematics and social justice in conjunction with each other. So those were both taught in a semi-hybrid format. So we basically negotiated to teach in person on Tuesday so that we could have that in-person time with our students, but then also to just try to minimize our exposure with each other. We were virtual on Thursdays. So we were doing a little bit of both for the last year. And I think the other question was, what is like one thing that I've taken away or one thing that I've learned throughout this experience? And I think the thing that I've really enjoyed and am moving to do beyond this year in the pandemic is really making sure that we're having time to just connect about things that aren't always math related, but just taking time to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk to somebody about what's going on in their life, sharing what's going on and how this really unusual time has been impacting them and what they're kind of looking forward to and how we can support each other moving forward. So that's something that is going to be built in very intentionally after this.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that, particularly thinking about sometimes high school math teachers get a bad rep, right? Like they only care about math. But I think that this has highlighted how important relationships are. Like I think deep down we all knew that, right? But we still love our mathematics, right? But thinking about the relationships and building those relationships with students and how important it is and how to intertwine it, right, within our courses and our content, and making sure that we are supporting all of our students, right? So thank you. Okay, so let's get into it. Now we know a little about you guys. Those people who are attending, feel free to put your comments and your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to those as we go through. We did have a few questions brought up ahead of time, and I shared those with the panelists that we're going to talk about. So some that we kind of thought of as an outreach team here, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing, and then some that people, attendees, I guess, were kind of asking about. So you might be wondering, maybe you're wondering, maybe not, who am I? So I am Brooke Mack. So I am on faculty here at Purdue. My role is to work with future mathematics teachers. So I work with either the K-6 elementary generalist teachers, the K-12 special ed teachers, or the 5-12 secondary teachers. So my work with the 5-12 teachers is mostly supporting them as their student teaching. I have taught their methods course before, but most of my role during the academic year is to work with the future teachers at the K-6, K-12, 5-12 levels. In the summer, my role is to support the in-service teachers a little bit more. And so that's kind of where this webinar came from, to really think about what do teachers need, what can help them move forward. And when I was a classroom teacher, I taught high school mathematics for 11 years. I would try my best to write a reflection every week about kind of things that were happening, and then at the end of the year, look back and go from there. And really at the end of the year, kind of summarize how things went. And I felt like here we are early in June, some of you have just finished or are finishing up now. And I thought it was a great opportunity for us to reflect on the year and what lessons we want to take moving forward. And so that's kind of where the first question I want us to, with the panelists to kind of address, is thinking about maybe what new strategies that are new to you strategies that you used during the pandemic that you want to keep using post-pandemic. So maybe even it's something like how Dr. Mckee was saying she recorded her lessons. Like, will she continue to do that? Was it helpful enough? Or are there other things that you guys thought about that you used that you feel like, yeah, you know what, I use this because of the pandemic, but moving forward, I want to continue because it's just good for students and it's good for learning particularly mathematics. So I don't know if anybody wants to go first. I don't know if we want to start with Jessica and work our way through, or if somebody else, we'll start with that, I guess.
I can go ahead and start. I think I'm like Dr. McKee. We used a lot of video formatting. We are a Google school, so we use like Google Meets. We had throughout the year, even though we didn't shut down at any point, we had students that were in and out of the building because of quarantine. And so making sure that they did not lose a step in that process. So having those Google Meets for us was great because those students, if they had access to the internet at home, could remote in at the time of that class. So it was like they were there, so they didn't miss a beat. And then through that program, also you could record the lessons. So it was like the student was in class. So if they didn't have internet that was strong enough to support a live feed, they could watch the video at a later time. And so that was really great. It gave them that opportunity. If they could meet live, they could still interact with their peers. They could still ask questions in live time. If they couldn't, then they still felt like they were part of the class because they were hearing their fellow classmates during the class time. And so that was something that I haven't used much before. I've used some video recording, Screencast-O-Matic, I always think is the one I use most frequently. And that's been nice to record, but I really enjoyed that Google Meet so we could still have that live interaction, even if they couldn't be with us.
Great, thanks. Dr. McKee or Mike, do you want to share maybe any strategies you learned about that you want to keep using?
Yeah, so I think I agree that the recording, I use Screencastify and I found it very user-friendly. We did Google Meets through the high school level, and then at the college level, we did Skype, and I recorded in both of them, and I was posting those, and that way people who were absent or quarantined could watch them at their convenience. And I even had students who said to me, I went back and rewatched them before the final when I struggled with something, I couldn't remember how to do it. And that really helped me. Or, before the test, I remember struggling on that section. So I went back and rewatched the video and reworked through it and understood it a lot better the second time. So I definitely think the recordings was big. And I think, Google Meet or Zoom, however you meet with your students, there's just something to say about that element of connection and having a live teaching. I look at my videos that I recorded last year, which were during the pandemic, which were I had no live students. And then this year when I had live students, and I was like, oh, they go so much better with live students because I'm not talking to myself and I'm not answering myself. It's so much more natural. So that I think definitely, yeah, that and then I also think because of students being at home and missing out on like answers, that I typically used to read in class, I started posting answer keys so students could check their work. And I might leave a couple off, and they knew those are the ones that I was going to collect and grade later, and But I used to be very anti putting answers online, and now I'm like, it's when a kid's quarantined, they're missing 2 weeks of school. They're not gonna come back and be pretty behind if they don't know if they're getting, if they're doing things correctly or not. So I think that also is something that I've changed my mindset on. So.
Good, and I think we'll come back to that in a little bit because I do think that it's important to think about have our priorities changed. So in a little bit, we'll kind of touch back on that because I think that does speak a little bit too. But I want to give Mike a chance to talk about any maybe strategies he's learned that he feels like he wants to continue using.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate what Ricky was just sharing, this idea of like shifting priorities a little bit. So as we're thinking about, at least in my experience, a lot of students going into quarantine or taking care of family members who were sick, or just like really recognizing the additional demands that students were kind of facing. And so deadlines became really nebulous during this time. And I think that I did not always handle it well. And it turned into, every student having their own trajectory for when they were turning in different assignments, and it became very burdensome. And I have small groups, so I can only imagine when you're still teaching 100 students or more students in some cases. And so, one of the strategies that somebody just gave to me recently, which I'm stealing and moving forward, is this idea of just giving every student a token or a pass or something that would say, no questions asked. I'm going to turn this in on my own deliverable due date. And I think that, you have to be a little bit strategic on which assignments you allow that for. Maybe more formative assessments or things that are kind of turned in, maybe not like one final summative, but giving students a little bit of their own flexibility and choice as to when they need to turn in those bigger projects. As opposed to everybody having their own kind of unique timelines. So that was something that I'm hoping to do better. And then I think also to this question about resources, there were two that I relied on specifically for the math content course pretty regularly. So I'm very much like wanting to get students up to the board, working on the whiteboards, and when we're virtual, that's not possible. And so I knew that I was going to use Desmos. That's like my go-to even when we're in person. But then Google Jamboard became this like crutch that I just relied on. So I don't know if people have used it, but basically it would allow students to like take pictures of their work and they would post them into like their own slides on Jamboard. And then we could highlight or like laser point or put comments on the different Jamboard slides for different groups when I would put them maybe in breakout rooms or something. And so that was really nice for letting students collaborate on a project, mark up the same text, and then give feedback to each other when we were back to whole group.
Yeah, you took us right into the next topic wonderfully. So thinking about the resources. So I wouldn't mind though if you said a little bit more about Desmos. So like one of the questions that one of your attendees has is thinking about like interactive ways to teach graphing. So can you share with us a little bit about how you use Desmos or maybe other resources that you have for graphing?
Yeah. And so I was thinking, and I'm just picking back up, I'm sorry, but I think, the question that I had seen you send, I'm not teaching students how to graph maybe the first time around. So I feel like I'm coming at this from a slightly different lens where it's like, okay, how are we engaging our own students? Desmos, though, I think when we're in the mathematics methods courses, we're talking a lot about those teacher resources that they have. And so I feel a little bit unprepared to like share a screen, but they have a lot of really nice kind of templates created where you can monitor different individual students who are working through a graphing problem, or maybe like a more interactive way of like a game where they're trying to make a graph go through a certain set of points or to do a certain type of rotation. And you can monitor individual students as well as give feedback to or pause students when you see them maybe going in a direction that you want to acknowledge or maybe redirect them back to where you were aiming.
And I see Jessica and Ricky kind of nodding along. I don't know. Do you want to share, Jessica?
Yes, so Desmos, I like that a lot too. We use that often. If you go to Desmos, they have a classroom activities section, and that's really where the kids can, and you can assign things. And like Michael was saying, you can see what each of your students is on, almost seeing their screen, and you can kind of see what mistakes they're making maybe and redirect them there. But it's really neat because they can visually see how the graph changes depending on certain things. I think of like slope and y-intercept and how the changes in those change what the line visually looks like. And so some of that interactive, just seeing it visually, with a slide bar or through points, I think is really great. I think GeoGebra has some really great activities also. They have a classroom resources section, same kind of thing. They have these little individual activities and they have it on just an unimaginable amount of topics. And you can even pick the classroom curriculum set that you're looking, if you're looking for a calculus or a pre-algebra, algebra. And so I think that's really great. Another one that I've used and some of our teachers have used is this EDIA. Now it's more of a practicing these skills. So it gives you that maybe a student that's quarantined and it's a digital aspect with practicing, but it has really great detailed explanations. So if a student gets it incorrect or they can answer it, they can see an explanation and they're very detailed, have great pictures if it's a graphing question. And so the students can see, even if you're not there to walk them through the step-by-step, that does a great job of doing that. The thing I really like too from the teacher perspective is when you go to select these types of questions for them to utilize, whether it be a practice or a quiz form, you're seeing the percentage of students that get those questions correct before you select the question. So I like having that kind of original data there to see, okay, this might be one that they struggle with. So I know they might need some additional help. And so I think that's been really great also. But I love the Desmos and the GeoGebra. Those are really great resources that we use often.
Awesome, thanks. And it sounds like there's a lot of options for you to access them or access the different classroom activities for it, and support for that. Ricky, anything you want to add for that? Feel good? Okay. All right. Well, so now let's shift, and maybe we'll let Ricky kind of take the lead on this. So the next questions I would like to kind of discuss are thinking about our priorities. So Ricky already kind of started this discussion a little bit, and Mike carried a little bit. Thinking about like, have your priorities shifted, and why do you think this is or is not the case? So I guess I'll just say a little bit. Thinking about, for me, I think homework due dates, I think, became a little bit more or less stringent. So I think there are time sensitive things, right, that you have to have certain due dates for. But then homework for me, it's really about practice. And so thinking about all the different ways like I can support the students. But anyway, I'll let Ricky kind of go from there, and then we'll come back together.
Yeah, homework due dates kind of shifted for me as well. They had to, because students were constantly gone, and so I basically just kind of shifted things and said, okay, your due dates for homework is everything has to be turned in by the time you take the test. And I had students taking tests at all kind of different times because of quarantine, but whatever day they were taking the test, that's when I decided their due date for all their homework was. I certainly like to see it, whenever I said, hey, I'm going to collect homework today. But, anybody who wasn't there, or anybody who just needed more time because they were trying to catch up still, it was like, turn it in. But then if you didn't turn it in, your due date to get it turned in was a test. And that was a really hard one for me because I used to be very strict on, no, I don't take late work. And no, your homework needs to be done before you come to math class. And so that one was a hard one for me to switch to. And then I just think I'd never liked having answers posted before because I thought, oh, students are just using them to cheat. Well, if you're teaching, I'm fortunate to teach, upper level where there's not just a single, like here's a one word answer or one number answer. They've got to show work anyhow. So, if they have the answer, who cares? Like they can check to see if they're getting it right versus them coming to class. And I actually kind of enjoyed it because I spent less time in class on homework because students would be like, the students were able to say to me, well, since I knew the answer was 7 and I got it wrong, I knew right away to go back to figure out where I messed up. So I came to class not having figured that one out already. And then I really spent time in class on the ones they really struggled with versus, oh, you made a math error, but you just didn't find it yourself type of thing. So, so that was a pleasant surprise.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think it is tricky, and sometimes we have to let go of our answers, right? And I think that also forces us to ask questions like, well, am I asking the right kinds of questions if it can be just a one number answer, right? Like, what am I really trying to find out? So how about you, Jessica? What about your priorities?
So I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as all of you. We felt like this year empathy was kind of our biggest kind of catchphrase. You need to have empathy. We don't know what the kids are dealing with at home. Like Michael said, some of them are caring for their sick family members, and maybe they're still dealing with the spring. The spring was pretty rough on a lot of our families, and so those would be things that we always kept in mind. So keeping that empathy for the kids and in their flexibility also with maybe Johnny needs a few extra days on a homework assignment like you guys talked about because Johnny's having a rough time at home, his grandma's been sick, or whatever the situation is. So I think absolutely that. I think going and playing off what Dr. Mckee said, also with the homework, I feel like I transitioned a lot of homework from at home by yourself to in class. Now we had that luxury because we were together in class. So we did a lot more problems in class, whether it be up at the board, whether we did small groups, whether it was a try it and trade with your neighbor and see if they can help you if you're stuck or they can check through if you finished. So I felt like that was different for me. We always went up to the board and we did these things, but these were just different. It was a lot more in depth. a lot more time, a lot more activities that were in class, so that when they were out of school, there was less school work to be done at home. Most of it was being done in school. Now, in some of the classes, like the AP Calculus, definitely, they did have to do things on their own outside of class. But for some of those others, we were able to bring it all into the classroom. And I really enjoyed that because, as we know, when homework leaves the classroom, you're not always sure who's doing it or where it's coming from. And so this was nice too, because I was able to see exactly which students had a good grasp, which students were really struggling, and maybe even fix those little ones in between they were almost there. They were just missing that one piece. And so that was really great too. Plus that group camaraderie, we're in this together. We know we're not going to ask Mrs. Laney at the drop of every hat. We're going to try to work together and see if we can figure it out and troubleshoot ourselves. Some of those things that Dr. Mckee talked about her students being able to do with the answers are the same kind of things that then happened in the classroom. They were able to work together and then try to problem solve on their own, which was really great to see.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it also speaks to what Mike was saying a little earlier about building relationships, right? So you're building the sense of community of learners where we're thinking about mathematics together. We're not just maybe necessarily trying to get the right answer. We're trying to think about how to make sense of this and how we can work on it together. So I love that. Okay,
and I'm going to interrupt you real quick. The other thing that I thought was really neat was, like you said, because of that, then the kids were not so much what'd you get, and they wanted to know how you got that. So where maybe we didn't have that before, it was more, what's the right answer? Let me scribble the work. Where this was, okay, explain to me how you did it. Or I was looking at it from this perspective and this is how I work. So then they're able to see the different routes to the same answer, which was kind of neat to see also. And you have those students interact that wouldn't normally interact with each other outside of the classroom. And so absolutely building that camaraderie that we're going to be in this together, which I feel like they kind of had a little bit of since the pandemic at the beginning, when they weren't together and they were desperate we want to be able to do all of those things. And so I think it kind of fed into that natural wanting to be together and wanting for us to be a group and come out of it together. So that kind of absolutely played into
it. I think what you both said has been wonderful. So I feel guilty getting the last word at this point, but I will just kind of reiterate how Brooke summarized and really focusing on relationships. And I think that's always been a focus for everybody who goes into education. But really, again, taking that time to check in with students, I think we've seen a lot of people really tending more towards mental health. And so making sure that we were taking that time, getting to know our students, and then it also just benefits us in our own instruction as we're developing lessons and putting mathematics in context that is really important to our students. And so allowing them to kind of negotiate what the topics are and the context in which they're learning, I think it's just like an immediate payback from taking that time, investing in your students and getting to know them both in and out of the classroom.
Yeah, very well said. That was a nice wrap up for that, Mike. Thank you. And I will say, I think maybe this is a good place to touch on. One of the questions from our attendees was asking about like constructive strategies to build critical thinking skills so that you can reach kind of like everybody, right? All your different learners. And I would say that maybe some of what you've been talking about here kind of speaks to that a little bit, like thinking about the questions that aren't just a one number answer, thinking about all the different things. So I think, and I know, I don't know that, Jessica, I don't even know if you know that I know this, but one of your students one time was asking me about a Precalc question, and I just looked at it, I thought, oh my gosh, that is so cool, because it was like saying like a student thinks like this, like is the student correct, like really asking that. And those are lots of questions that we see kind of in the upper elementary, kind of like it's coming its way. And it was really cool to see it in a Precalc class, like asking that, and different kinds of questions I think that can reach all of them, or asking students to like create an equation for a line that would go through whatever, these different points, but or maybe a certain point that has a different slope, or all kinds of different things, maybe where there's not necessarily one way to get there or one right answer, or lots of different ways that they can think about it. So I hope that maybe speaks a little bit to that question. But all right, next up. So I think I have my next question there, thinking about maybe some lessons learned during the pandemic, but I feel like we've kind of already touched on that a little bit. I think I want to shift to our next question first. So I really want to think about the peer learning, like how you support that, thinking about how do you build those relationships. I think you've already touched a little bit on it, but sometimes, like Jessica was saying, some of these kids wouldn't necessarily engage with each other outside of the classroom. So how do you make them feel comfortable talking about mathematics together? How do you get them engaged and then support them, particularly with the social distancing? We don't know what that's going to look like in the fall. Like, how do you get them working together? So Jessica, would you like to start us on this one?
Sure. So one thing that I do in my class is making sure that they understand that we're all going to have wrong answers, right? And I mean, they see that even with me. Maybe today I add 7 plus 5 and I get 13 instead of 12. I mean, they may, just like Dr. Mckee was saying, she got used to messing up on video. We do that in the classroom, right? You add incorrectly, you say something wrong. So I think them seeing that we're all human and we're all going to make those mistakes, and it's okay if it's wrong, because that might move somebody else forward. I think that kind of safety, I think, helps. And then also, I think not forcing, that's not the right word, but getting helping kind of the groups form. So it's not always you don't get to choose your groups every time. So I don't always go to the same person that I'm comfortable with. Today, maybe we form our groups by who we're seated next to. Tomorrow, we count off in 4s. Just I think getting kids interacting with other kids. I also think that talking more in class about non-math things, like Michael talked about, is great, because then they realize that they might have a similar interest as somebody else in their class, and that automatically forms that kind of just human connection. And then the math comes easy after that. But I think just doing it often and changing it up with groups really helps to kind of get the comfort level. I know for us, like I said, we were in person, so that was great. We were able to do small groups for short amount of time. So maybe it's a group activity for 5-7 minutes, and then we transition to something else, and we can come back to another group activity at a later time. I am hoping in the future that it can be maybe longer increments, that they can be together and not have a concern for their health. But for this year, it was short increments with groups.
All right, thank you. Dr. Mckee, would you like to go next? Sorry, Mike.
So I think that's one thing that I struggled with this year was I normally have my students sitting in groups, because I feel like physically having those groups of 4, groups of 3, whatever you choose, physically having the desk turned towards each other starts from day one, that, hey, we're a group, we're a team, we're going to do this together. And I struggled because I wasn't allowed to do groups this year. My school said, no, everybody has to be facing front. Everybody has to be facing the same way, or facing the same direction. I couldn't even do like half and half, both facing the middle. Things like that are even, I think that's even good too. Just facing each other just kind of physically puts them in the mindset of, hey, we're a group, we're a team, we're gonna work this together. But I struggle with that this year, because I feel like I lost that by having my desks in rows, but I definitely agree that group work is the best way to, I just think putting them in groups, and like you said, Jessica said, not letting them pick their groups all the time is the best way to help get students talking about the math. And then as you kind of walk around and help the groups and stuff, don't just go and say, okay, to the whole group, what do you guys think? You ask the quiet person who doesn't seem like they're contributing, and then you get them to talk. And I'm so amazed by the things that they'll say when you directly ask them, or just, hey, saying, hey, Brooke, do you have anything to contribute to this? Or what are your thoughts? And you're surprised. It's always surprising that some of the quiet kids, what they'll say when directly asked, and then just giving them that little opportunity from then on usually leads to them working better in groups.
Yeah, I'll add to that and say, I think it was, a real challenge getting students to work in groups. I feel like my undergraduate students were more comfortable being in groups than I was usually being in a group. So we kind of like normed up what are we comfortable with as a class, given the like Protect Purdue guidelines and things that we were making sure that we aligned to. So we relied a lot on the turn and talk as just like a real basic, like, okay, we know that learning mathematics is this like social experiment where we're trying to make sense of these really complex ideas. And so not talking about it's not really an option. And so making sure that, you know, anytime I asked a question, it was wait time, give everybody a chance to like, just like sit in that idea for a moment. And then turn and talk with your partner. And then if we were comfortable with it, moving into groups and spending a lot of time in those groups. So like Dr. Mckee, we weren't able to do that as much on the in-person days. So on our Thursday classes, I just put them in breakout rooms, and most of the class was them working through a larger problem in those sessions. But then I think it's a lot too about, and I really like what Jessica was saying about normalizing mistakes. And so, you know, as students are doing their turn and talk, we would always say, like, you know, make sure that as a teacher, you're ear hustling and making sure that you're like catching all the little snippets of things and the ways in which students are thinking about mathematical problems. And then highlighting, here's a common mistake that we heard. You don't have to like put an individual student on blast, but you can say, okay, here's something that I heard Ricky saying, or sorry, here's a common idea that I heard people saying, putting it up on the board, letting students talk about it and talk about why that was potentially a misconception that they were coming to. And then, okay, how do we make sure that we don't do this again? Or how does this help move our thinking forward about similar problems? And I think that highlighting those mistakes or those misconceptions throughout the discussion normalizes the mistakes, makes it not a big deal, and invites people to really critique each other's work, which I think is a really productive part of class.
Can I throw in one more thing?
Yeah.
So Mike got me thinking about something that he said on his Thursday classes when he put them in breakout groups. I was surprised this year by when students who would maybe not speak up on a Google Meet, they would put it in a chat. And I was like, oh, look at them. And, and it was just the kids who maybe aren't comfortable speaking are comfortable writing their words, writing their thoughts down in paper kind of thing. And so that was kind of neat.
Yeah, I'll say too, it's like, I was gonna say too, with like the Jamboard, it can be anonymous. And so you have more students participating than you have students in the class, right? So you're getting like more responses and multiple students are responding and engaging verbally. So I think giving them that multiple ways of engaging with the topic, I think is really helpful.
And I'll just add, so I have seen some teachers maybe pose a problem in a Google Doc, and then the students can all comment it, and it's like up on the screen for everybody to see, right? So that you can kind of have this discussion, this live discussion, like you said, because sometimes they are more comfortable typing. They're like, they're the texters, right? They like to text. They don't want to answer phone calls. They don't want to talk in person, right? And kind of speaking a little bit to what Mike was saying, I do think, like, so as you're walking around, right, looking at groups and then taking, maybe you see 4 different approaches to a problem and you go put them on the board. You're not calling out the groups, right? You're just saying, these are 4 approaches I saw, like, evaluate them. Do you agree with them? And they might all be good approaches, but they might all not, right? But it gives them a chance, like, particularly when you don't say, like, there's one right answer, like, you just say, like, what do you think of them? Do they work? Do they make sense? It gives them all an opportunity to kind of evaluate all 4, as opposed to like, let me just find the one that's right and then I'll be done, right? I do think like that this generation of kids coming in, they've been exposed to these questions that aren't really pick the right answer. That like their multiple choice questions are pick as many as apply now, right? Like that's what we're starting to see. That's how they're being assessed by the state. And so we have to be mindful of that as we're thinking about teaching the mathematics and thinking about learning mathematics too. Okay, these have been some really good thought-provoking strategies, different things that you guys have shared, the resources. I see someone really excited for the EDIA resource. I had not heard of it either, so I'm excited to check that out. I think maybe these last few minutes, I just would like maybe you guys to each share maybe your final thoughts, kind of like maybe what does teaching look like now for you next year? Like assuming that we're all in person, how does it look different than it did in 2019? So who would like to go first? Jessica, you want to start?
Sure, I can go ahead and go. I think just like we talked about, we've always gotten to know our students to find their interests, but I feel like that's been brought, more to the forefront. And that's something that I have really enjoyed. I think it makes learning the math easier. It makes forming those connections. The kids form the connections to the math a little bit better as well. So I think that's something that I really enjoy. I've also really enjoyed and probably will definitely continue the more in-class activity type where they're showing what they're learning rather than doing the outside of class homework. Now, there's still a time for that and it'll still be around, but that's definitely something that I would like to take with. I also really love the idea of the recording the lessons. I'll be honest, at first I didn't. I don't enjoy being, on camera and recording myself for all time, but I'm like Dr. Mckee. At the beginning, in the spring, I was talking to myself. I can ramble with the best of them. So being live with the students was great, but having that recording and giving the students that comfort, they could look up how to do that topic any number of places in a video, but there's just a comfort level with the teacher they have, and they know how you explain things. Maybe there's a comfort level with that. So that's definitely something that I'm gonna take forward with me, that I've learned to enjoy the recordings.
Dr. Mckee, you want to go next?
I think I miss my group work. I would like to get that back. I'm hoping that things will be different in the fall where I can have them back in groups, because I do miss out on that. But I agree. The recordings are something that, even if we're working in groups, I think I would still record the class. Record myself like talking, and so you could hear people talking, like the classroom without faces, so that students can see, like, this is what's going on. And I actually did, that was one of my school goals this year, was to post the videos of every lesson. And I asked students at the end, did you find them helpful, or did you find that it was annoying, or, were they all over the place? And actually, I think it was like something like in my pre-calculus class, I think it was something unexpected, like 89% of them said they felt that they could come back into class seamlessly, like they hadn't missed a beat. And I really liked that. I think the lower level, like math for 2 kids, they didn't like it as much. But I think that has to do with age, maturity. But those upper level classes, I think they're the ones who feel that pressure of, I don't want to be behind when I come back. So I do like that, but I'm looking forward to hoping to get back into groups.
I'll say that I think the thing that has really kind of stood out for me at this point is how much stronger my lessons are when I co-develop them with other people. And I think that when I was a secondary math teacher, I had opportunities to co-develop lessons or units with other teachers, usually in like structured settings after like end of course assessments or after end of module assessments or something. And we would, plan like the reteach lessons, and like those were opportunities to kind of co-plan. And I feel like during the pandemic, I've had like a lot of Zoom meetings that just kind of like pop up and become a part of my regular life. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we'll just keep meeting on Zoom. And then we just started like planning these like lessons where we're incorporating like other people's areas of expertise, and really looking at, instead of only being like a mathematics content lesson, but then looking at like the refugee crisis around the world. And so bringing in like other people's areas and like concentrations and bringing them into the course and developing lessons together has actually, I think, resulted in much stronger lessons, which doesn't seem like it should be that surprising, but like finding the time to do that and then like prioritizing that has become a new priority for me. So that's something that I hope to continue doing.
I like that. And I guess I hope that maybe what people take away from this is a little bit of that too, right? Like this opportunity to come together and to hear what different people have done, and how they plan to move forward. And I think it sounds like all of you have recognized the importance of relationships, right, with students, and maybe even shifting a little bit, what does that look like in terms of empathy, right? That's something that was mentioned. And really, how do we build that sense of community among our students and encourage them to be learners, right? We're still mathematics teachers, and we still have to focus on mathematics, but we also are kind of maybe getting that umbrella a little bit wider for what we're caring about, I guess. So I think that's about everything. I think we're about out of time here. We are out of time, but I want to thank you all. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ricky, for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. I really appreciate it. If anybody has questions, you can reach out to me. This hopefully will be turning to a YouTube video, and we'll share that so you can share it with other people. just to kind of hear from your community, hear from your mathematics teachers. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great summer.